Good day, brothers and sisters in Christ. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to continue with our exciting series in Daniel, and we're moving into chapter 8. And this is just a wonderful chapter to unpack. So let's have a look at that chapter in our Bibles. We open that up. And we'd like to just listen to Okay, folks, let's have a look at my notes here, and let's open up and see what we can unpack from Daniel chapter 8, and I've titled it Antinochus and the Antichrist. In the ancient manuscripts, the book of Daniel here resumes using the Hebrew language. So we've got to remember that there's a section in Daniel between chapter 2 verse 1 and Daniel 7 verse 28 that are written in Aramaic. Okay, so the first two verses introduces us to this vision. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belteshazzar, a vision appeared to me. To me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me for the first time, I saw in the vision, and it was, and it also happened while I was looking, that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is the province of Elam, and I saw the vision that I was by the river Ulai. The 3rd year of the reign of King Belteshazzar, the vision happened while Babylon was securely in power. Okay? And it's a vision that deals with the emergence and the destiny of the Greek Empire that is to come. The Greek Empire was not much of anything at this time this vision came to Daniel. Daniel was on business for the king, okay, in Shushan, the citadel, okay, which is a province obviously under the Babylonian rule. And verse 3 to 4, a mighty ram pushes in different directions. Okay, let's break that down. When I lifted my eyes and saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other. The higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westwards, northwards, southwards, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. So here we see the ram which has 2 horns. Right? In this chapter we're going to see in verse 20, this ram is clearly identified as representing the Medo-Persian Empire, which succeeded the Babylonian Empire. Okay. Right. It wasn't a stretch of the imagination, okay, for Daniel to have a reference of a ram which represented the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. Because the 4th century historian states that the Persian ruler bore the head of a ram as he stood at the head of his army. Okay, Wood says that. And Strauss is a ram was a national emblem of Persia. Okay, as we see in history that the ram was stamped on Persian coins, as well as on the letter or the headdress of the Persian emperors. Okay. Then, let's break it further down. The two horns were high, but one was higher than the other. The ram was noted for the proportion of its two horns. One was higher than the other. This was an accurate prediction of the partnership now between the Medes and the Persians, because the Persians were larger and stronger than the Medes, okay, and they also emerged after the Medes. Okay, so pushing westwards, northwards, and southwards, you've got to see that the Medo-Persian Empire exerts its power to the north, to the south, and to the west. History testifies to that. It took the territory, okay, and made no major conquests towards the east, though. Okay. The principal theatre of their wars, okay, Clark tells us that that was against the Scythians, the northern part of it, against the Greeks in the west, and against the Egyptians in the southward area of their campaigns. Okay, a male goat challenges and conquers the ram. This is in verse 5 and 8. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between its eyes, and it came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with fierce power, and I saw him confronting the ram, and he moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke the two horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him. And there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up towards the 4 winds of heaven. Okay, so here we come to the end of the verses here. Verse 8, and a male goat came from the west. I've got a couple of images here that I want to just show you quickly. And here we see there's the ram that Daniel refers to in verses 1 to 7. There's the Medo-Persian Empire, and then also in verse 20. And then the he-goat, which we are doing now, 5 to 8, is the Greek Empire, and also mentioned in a little later on in the chapter as verse 21. So as we carry on, okay, we see from ancient history we know that this wasn't a strange symbol. The goat was a common expression of the Greek Empire. Okay, that's what Clark said. Across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, this prophetic description of the male goat was proved to be accurate. Okay, regarding the Greek Empire. The Greek Empire rose from the west, okay, and the Greek Empire rose with great speed, suddenly, and also without touching the ground. And the Greek Empire also had a notable ruler, which was Alexander the Great, which represents, let's have a look at this other picture that I've got, this other image that I have here, okay, is the horn. This is a little later on after Alexander the Great has passed away, okay, but in my previous, that's the great horn representing Alexander the Great. Okay, so, okay, and then the Greek Empire had a famous war with the Medo-Persian Empire. I saw him confronting the ram. So there was a major conflict and a war. And historical evidence also backs that up. The Greek Empire and the Medo-Persian Empire, they greatly hated each other. Okay, and that's also what Daniel said. With furious power, moved with rage. And some of the greatest and fierce battles of ancient history were fought between the Greeks and the Persians. Okay, the Greek Empire conquered the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, and no one that could deliver the ram from his hands. Okay, so here we see the Greek Empire, according to secular history as well as biblical history now, we see, confirms that the Greek Empire defeated the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, the reign of the notable leader of the Greek Empire was suddenly cut short. Okay, we see that in this part of the verse. The large horn was broken. Okay, and then that signifies the end of Alexander the Great's reign. And then, as secular history also attests, the Greek Empire was divided into 4 rulers, okay, in the place of 4 notable horns that came up. So here in this image that I've got here, this is the image that represents the era after Alexander the Great had died, and he had 4 generals who ruled over areas. Okay, and we'll explore that right now. Okay, and then Alexander did not divide the empire among the 4 generals himself. His 4 leading generals divided it amongst themselves by force after his death. And here we go, here's the divisions. The 4 generals were Cassander, ruler over the Greeks and its regions. Lysimachus, also ruling over Asia Minor. And Cellulus was ruling over Syria and Israel. Okay. And Ptolemy ruled over Egypt. Okay. So if we go back to this picture here, we see there is Lysimachus, there's that great horn there. Cellulus over here. Okay. Pottery was over here. Okay. And Cassandra is represented with this horn down here. Okay. And that's the ram. And this whole image is depicting the Grecian Empire from the time of 333 to 168 BC. And then we see a conspicuous little horn coming here, and that's Antiochus the Fourth. And we'll read about him a little bit more now. Okay. Okay. The male goat grew very great. The greatness of Alexander's empire was not only in its vast dominion, but also its cultural power. Alexander the Great was determined to spread the Greek civilization, culture, and language across every land he conquered. Okay. So, here, just a footnote that I've got. As God guided history, he used Alexander's passion to spread the Greek culture, to prepare the world for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because of Alexander's influence, the Koinonia, or the common Greek, became the common language of the civilized world, okay, in the time of the New Testament. Okay, so then we move on to verse 9 to 12. The strong horn that arises from 4 horns of the male goat. And out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. It grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground, and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of the transgressions of an army was given over the horn to oppose the daily sacrifice. He cast truth down to the ground, and he did all this and prospered. Okay, so let's have a look. This was fulfilled in one of the 4 successors of Alexander the Great. Since the dominion of this horn was extended towards the south, towards the east, towards the glorious land. Okay. We can identify historically fulfillments of this little horn in Antiochus the Fourth, who ruled over Syria and Israel land under the Seleucid dynasty. Okay. Right. Israel land was contested between the dynasties of the Seleucids and Ptolemy, but the Seleucids gained great power over the region in the days of Antiochus III, which happened in 198 BC. However, Antiochus IV gained his place on the throne, okay, after his father, okay, by murdering his brother, the former king of Seleucus, okay, the son of Philopator was the rightful heir to the throne. But Antiochus IV had him held hostage in Rome, and Antiochus IV legitimized his rule mainly through flattery and bribery. And Antiochus IV assumed the title of Epiphanes, which means illustrious. However, the ancient Greeks twisted his name to Epimanes, which means madman. Okay. So the glorious land here refers to in Hebrew is the land of Israel, as there are references in Ezekiel 20 verse 6, the glory of the lands, and Ezekiel 25 verse 9, the glory of the country, and in Daniel 11 also there are similar wordings in Psalm 48 verse 2. Okay, so we can see here, before we go down here, let's have a look at this image here. Now this is Daniel 8, this is the Antiochus IV here, and we can see, right, no accuracy was ever given more accurately and fulfilled than this. That's researched by Josephus. He states that, he gives that quote, okay, and we see that he came to power, yeah, in the latter time of their kingdom. He came to power in AD 175 or BC 175, 7 years before the demise of the Grecian Empire. And then he also came out of one of them, okay, one of the rulers or one of the dynasties of the remaining 4 generals. Okay, he ruled from 175 BC to 164 BC until his death. Okay, and then Antiochus IV also not only sought to enlarge his territory. Okay, so there it states there, and we can see that playing out now in Scripture as we read and open the Scriptures now. We can rightly see that the glorious land as the center of the world, it is the nerve center of civilization since the days of Noah. It is the truth center from which flowed God's revelation to man. It is the storm center of warning nations since the days of Joshua. It will be the peace center of the earth during the millennium reign of Jesus. It will be the home center of the Jewish people forevermore. Okay, so those statements we can testify to. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. Antiochus was an accurate and dramatic fulfillment of this prophecy in history. Okay, so much so that the critics insist that the book of Daniel must have been written after his time. Okay, so here Daniel prophesies way before the Greek Empire even starts to become dominant, and he not only prophesies that, but he prophesies that the Greek Empire after Alexander the Great's death will be divided into four, and out of the one of the four, a dominant ruler would rule over the Holy Land. Okay, so here he extended his, here Antiochus extends his dominion towards the south and towards the east and towards Israel. And Antiochus murdered other rulers and persecuted the people of Israel. Here we see that in this verse, cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. Okay, and then Antiochus also blasphemed God and commanded idolatrous worship directed towards himself. So he's another leader in the vein of Nebuchadnezzar, exalting himself as high as the prince of the host. Okay. Antiochus also put a stop to temple sacrifices in Jerusalem. Okay, and here in this verse, in these couple of verses we see, by him the daily sacrifices were taken away. And then we can also see Antiochus, okay, he desecrated the temple. Okay, the place of his sanctuary was cast down, it says in these verses. And then Antiochus opposed God and seemed to prosper, even though he cast down the truth to the ground. He did all this and he still prospered. Okay. Then we need to have a look at the next part of this verse. It cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground. The host and stars are symbols used in the Old Testament for angels, kings and leaders or people of God at large. This prediction was fulfilled in by Antiochus and his attacks against the rulers and against God's people in general. Okay, so the term stars of heaven there's a reference in Genesis 12 verse 3, Genesis 15 verse 5. And the hosts of the Lord is also Exodus 12 verse 41, are at the times used for God's people in general. Okay, so here we see there's a reference of God's people being referred to as stars in heaven in Genesis and in Exodus. So, here Barnes says, undoubtedly, it is the design here to describe the pride and ambition of this little horn and to show that he did not think anything to exalt for his aspiration. Okay. And then he trampled them. Antiochus was an infamous persecutor of the Jewish people. He wanted them to submit to the Greek culture and customs and were more than willing to use murder and violence to compel them. And Antiochus' suspension of the Jews came to an head in December of 168 BC when he returned after a defeat at Alexander, and then he ordered the generals to seize Jerusalem on the Sabbath. There he sat and set up an idol of Zeus and discriminated or desecrated the altar by an offering of swine and sprinkling of pigs' juices in this sanctuary, thus resulting in the sacrifices being stopped because the temple was desecrated. So now we need to look outside biblical evidence, and we need to look at the book of Maccabees. In the book of Maccabees, in chapter 1, a couple of verses, describes how Antiochus persecuted the Jews. So the Maccabees revolt was around the same time, and here the book of Maccabees describes the blasphemous attitude of Antiochus, and in some accounts they say that he was responsible for the murder of more than 100,000 Jews. Okay. So here's 3 references that I've got out of the book of Maccabees to confirm Antiochus's persecution of the Jewish people in Jerusalem. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector to tribute unto the cities of Judah, came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spoke peacefully words upon them. But all was deceit. For when they had given his credence, he fell suddenly upon the city, and smote it very sore, and destroyed much people of Israel. So you can see that he's a deceitful leader. Okay, and he had taken all the spoils of the city and set the city alight. Okay. Even the women and children he took captive and possessed the cattle there. In that account from the book of Maccabees 1, chapter 1, verse 29 to 32. And then also the other account from 52 to 61 gives us another incredible account. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, every one that forsook the law. So they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even where so they could flee for. Okay, now the 15th day of the month of Casulu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation on the altar, and built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and their streets. And they had torn into pieces the books of the law which they found, and burnt them with fire. And whosoever was found with the book of the testament, or if they committed the law of the king's the king's commandment was that they should be put to death. So here we can see in BC 145 already, there was a huge persecution and decimation of the temple. And then also verses 41 to 50 tells us, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should but one people, and everyone should leave his law, so that the heathen agree according to the commandments of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters and messages into Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. Okay, so here we see that a lot of the Israelite people became idolaters here. Okay? And he also says that he said, set up altars and groves and chapels and idols and sacrifice swine flesh and unclean beasts. They also should leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. Okay, to the end they might forget the law. So he'd done all this in order to try and ensure that the Jewish nation would forget about their God. Okay. But we carry on and we'll read a little bit more now on these verses. Because of the transgressions, an army was given over the horn to possess daily sacrifices. So here, Daniel in his vision is more accurate in his description. This was fulfilled in the terrors of Antiochus. So as we've read, this is the fulfillment of the Maccabees account. The Jews especially, their leaders, invited God's judgment upon them through Antiochus because of their sin. Okay. So here the first attack of Antiochus against the Jews for this time was to settle the rivalry of the office of high priest. Okay. So here we see there was a rivalry to appoint a high priest, and this Pontius or pious high priest Onanas the third was removed from the office and was replaced by his brother Jason. Okay. Because Jason bribed Antiochus. Okay. And then there's a whole lot of abdications and a whole lot of replacements as we go through up until 171 BC. Okay. With the replacing of the high priests. This was the reason why God set over them such a breathing devil. Trap says, as was Antiochus for the punishment of their open apostasy. Okay. So here we see in this period of time, the Jewish people really and truly fell away, fell into idolatry, okay, of the pagan gods of Antiochus. And we can see, because God is such a sovereign God, He allowed this to take place. The duration of the sanctuary, desolation or discrimination, is set 2,300 days. When I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will this vision be? concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgressions of desolation, the giving of both sanctuary and the hosts to be trampled under foot. And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. And many think this nameless Holy One is an Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ. This is possible, but there is not much information to be certain about that. Okay. Daniel didn't ask this question, how long this vision would be. He heard the Holy One speaking together, and one of them asked the question. They wanted to know how long the sacrifices would be suspended for, and how long the sanctuary would be desecrated. Okay. So he heard the angel speaking about that. For 2,300 days, literally, Daniel heard a Holy One say 2,300 days. Mornings and evenings, okay. Both Bible students debate if this means 2,300 days or 1,150 days. We got to remember that 2,300 days is almost 7 years. Equates to almost 7 years. Okay. So we got to also remember that either understanding is possible, but it is more likely this means 2,300 days. The date when the temple was cleansed is well established. On December the 25th, 165 BC. Okay, that's when the temple was cleansed again. And if we count back 2,300 days from then, it comes to the year when Antiochus began his persecution in earnest against the Israelite people. And that lands on 171 BC. 171 BC. Okay, so now, but there's another aspect to look at and to consider and to ponder. If we take it to mean 1,150 days, it can refer to the time the temple was actually desecrated. Okay, a man by the name of Full Newell makes this case. Okay, for a duration of time during which is 2,300 daily sacrifice could ordinarily have been offered, one in the evening and one in the morning, as specified in Exodus chapter 29, verse 38 to 43. Okay. Since there are two of these daily sacrifices, it means that the time period would only be 1,150 days. Slightly over 3 years. This, in fact, was the time that the Maccabean tribulation took place, where they started to fight and resist the occupation in 168 to 165 BC, at the end of which the sanctuary was cleansed by Judas Maccabees in his restoration of the evening and morning sacrifices. And 2 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 1 to 5 describes that account. Okay. However, we need to also understand this passage has been a favorite springboard to elaborate the fanciful prophetic interpretations. A popular and tragic interpretation of this passage took 1 year for every day. Okay, so yes, in scripture, God says 1 day is like 1,000 years for me. Okay? So, we've just got to be careful on the application. We need to rightly divide the word of truth. Otherwise, the result is something like William Miller used. He said that the 2,300 year days, okay, to calculate that Jesus would return in 1844, 2,300 years after Cyrus issued the decree to rebuild the temple. Okay. His movement ended up by giving birth to the Seventh-day Adventist and to the Jehovah's Witnesses and several other movements. Okay. We are going to have a look, okay, at this prophecy in chapter 9, and we will break it down, rightly dividing the word of truth and understanding that prophecy. We can know that Miller and other year-day theories are wrong because this passage was fulfilled before the time of Jesus. Okay, so we can see that as we look back. Jesus recognized that the temple was properly cleansed and rededicated when he attended the feast of dedication, okay, commemorating the cleansing and the rededication of the temple after the desecration brought by Antiochus, okay, the fourth. And that we can see in John chapter 10 verse 22. Okay. Otherwise, Christ would never have gone to the temple. Here, also, we need to have a look at Adam Clarke's comment. Okay. He comments, and he says it shows what a hold the year-date approach had on many of his time. Okay. Though literally it be 2,300 evenings and mornings, yet I think the prophetic day should be understood here, as in other parts of this prophet. It might signify so many years. If we date these years from the vision that Daniel had, in other words, when Alexander invading Asia, this was in 3670 BC or 334, okay, and 2,300 years from that time we would reach AD 1966, or 141 years from the present, AD 1825. There is no foundation for Clarke's approach, and it has led to many other prophecies being seriously in error. Okay. So, this prophecy we need to take as literal. As we can see in the Maccabees account, there's no futuristic prophetic meaning to be applied there. Okay. The vision is interpreted. Gabriel appears to Daniel. Then it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision, so that he can come near where I stood. And when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now he was speaking with me. I was in a deep sleep with my face on the ground, but he touched me and I stood upright. And he said, look, I'm making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. Between the banks of the Ulai, Daniel was still in the midst of his vision when he saw himself on the shores of the Persian River. He heard someone instruct Gabriel to explain the vision to him. The vision refers to the time of the end. Okay. Gabriel assured Daniel that the vision had to do with end times, with the latter time of indignation. This is a problem for some because we see the prophecy of Daniel 8, verse 1 to 14, was fulfilled in the days of the Medo-Persian and Greek empires, especially in the time of Antiochus. The term time of the end and the latter time of indignation commonly refers to what we think of the end times is, not events fulfilled more than 100 years before the birth of Christ. Okay. So we need to remember that footnote. The answer is that though the prophecy was fulfilled in Antiochus IV reign, it was also a latter fulfillment of the Antichrist, referring to the reference of time of the end. Okay. So here we have a prophecy that is partially fulfilled and the other part that is yet to be fulfilled. Okay, which often happens in prophecy. So Antiochus IV is sometimes called the Antichrist of the Old Testament. He prefigures the Antichrist of the end times. Just as Antiochus rose to power with force and intrigue, so will the Antichrist, as he persecutes the Jews, so will the Antichrist. As he stopped sacrificing and desecrated the temple, so will the Antichrist. As he seemed to be a complete success, so will the Antichrist. From what Antiochus did to the Jews in his day, therefore, one may know the general pattern of the Antichrist and what he will do to God's people in the future. That's what wood deduces. Okay. Greece, Heslop says, Greece, with all its refinements, culture, art, produced the Old Testament Antichrist, while the so-called Christian nations produce the New Testament Antichrist. Okay. So there's a type of, okay, so if we overlay the events of Daniel as to what's happening or going to happen in Revelation 13, we can see the similarities of an Antichrist dictator rising. Okay. What shall happen in the latter time of the indignation for the appointed time? Okay, some see Antiochus and Antichrist connection, and some do not. Martin Luther, however, said this chapter in Daniel refers to the Antiochus and Antichrist. But John Calvin wrote, hence Luther, indulging in his thoughts too freely, refers to this passage to mark the Antichrist. So both of those great reformers differ in the application and interpretation of this. Okay, so verse 20 to 22, we see the specific identification of the ram and the male goat in Daniel's vision. The ram which you saw, having 2 horns, they are kings of the Media and Persia, and the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The larger horn is between its eyes, is the first king. As for the broken horn of the 4 that stood in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not one with its power. Okay, the large horn that is between the eyes of the first king. This was fulfilled in history by Alexander the Great. Okay, we can see that in my comments in verses 5 to 8. Okay. 4 kingdoms shall arise out of the nations, but not with its power. This was also fulfilled in history by the generals who divided Alexander's empire between them. Also referenced in my notes 5 to 8. Okay, so verses 23 to 26, the rise and fall of the strong little horn. Right? And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions have reached their fullness, a king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully. He shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart, and he shall destroy many of their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human means. And the vision of the evening and the mornings, which was told, is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for this refers to the days of the future. But the prophecy in this passage reads equally true for both Antiochus and the Antichrist. This is an example of a prophetic passage that has both a near and far fulfillment. Antiochus was known for his cruel brutality, This will also be true of the coming Antichrist. Antiochus was known for his flattery and smooth tone. The coming of the Antichrist will strike a covenant with Israel, and we'll see that in our next chapter. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. Antiochus was empowered by Satan allowed by God to rule. And the same will be true of the coming Antichrist. Shall prosper and thrive. Antiochus looked like a total success. The coming Antichrist will look like a complete winner until God topples his reign. Okay, then also Antiochus not only destroyed his enemies, but also harshly persecuted God's people. The coming Antichrist will also destroy and persecute. He shall cause deceit to prosper, both the rule of Antiochus in the past and the Antichrist rule in the future are marked by deceit. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth, and that they might be saved. And that is in 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 and 10. He shall exalt himself in his heart. The coins of Antiochus are inscribed with this title, Theos Epiphanes, meaning God manifest. The coming Antichrist will also exalt himself, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. That's also in 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 4. Okay. Then he shall even rise against the Prince of Princes. Though the Antiochus hated the people of God and fought against him, it was because he really hated God. The same will be true of the coming Antichrist, who will hate the Jews because he hates God. Broken without human means, history tells us that Antiochus died of a disease, not by the hand of man. In a similar way, no man will defeat the coming Antichrist, but by the hand of Jesus. He will strike him down. In Revelation 19 verse 20, we see that. And also, therefore, seal up this vision. Here, Daniel must do this in his day. The vision referred to the period far distant in its ultimate fulfillment. Okay. For us, the time is near, as Revelation 1 verse 3 tells us, and the book is unsealed in Revelation 22 verse 10. So here, Daniel must seal up this vision, because it is a vision referring to the far distant future and the ultimate fulfillment of it. Okay. Here in verse 27, Daniel reacts to the vision with physical shock and astonishment. And Daniel, fainted and was sick for days after. I arose and went about the king's business. I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it. I fainted and was sick, and I was astonished. Daniel probably couldn't understand why God would show or allow such a mighty persecutor of his people to come to power and seemingly have success. He may well have been puzzled by why Yahweh would permit even this brief time a brutal opposition under the little horn. That's Archer. He quotes that. I went about the king's business. Daniel didn't let either the spiritual mysteries or the physical weakness keep him from doing his duty. This shows us that our interest in prophecy should make us more concerned with our king's business, not less concerned about it. Okay, we should have counted it a great slur on his religious life if it could have been said that his visions and exercises interfered with the service of the king. And that's Maya saying that about Daniel. Let us not neglect the work of the Lord, though less able to perform it. A sick child's service is doubtably accepted. That's top. He's encouraging us as we read prophecy and as we see prophecy being fulfilled before our eyes. We should be still about our Father's business, about spreading the gospel of Christ, winning people to Christ. In Proverbs, it tells us that he who wins souls is wise. No one understood it. It wasn't because God never wanted this prophecy to be understood. There is no reason for God to reveal something to man that can never be understood. The reason why no one understood it was because the vision was sealed up in light of its ultimate fulfillment in Daniel's distant future. Okay. So that's the reason. It is it's worth repeating. The time is not distant for us. In light of Revelation 1 verse 3, the book of the prophecy is not sealed in the light of Revelation chapter 22 verse 10. So as we come to the end of this chapter, we need to rightly divide the word of truth, and that's what I've laid out for everyone. I pray and I ask that you ponder over this chapter, read it and ask the Lord to fill you with the Holy Spirit, to reveal the wisdom behind the scriptures. And folks, if I could ask you, please, if you could subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and share my videos with as many of your friends and family as possible. Brothers and sisters in Christ, I trust you will have a blessed week, and we shall chat again in chapter 9.